my whole being is changing over the last 4 or 5 years. And with it, the voice of my music, it just is continuing to do the thing that it did when I was 10 years old. It's just continuing to follow this crazy hum down this crazy path. And the path is not a straight path. It's always changed. It has always morphed into something completely new. But it's always felt good.
Hello and welcome to the Beautiful Work Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Krikorian. Each episode, we feature a special guest from all walks of life, and we ask them to explore the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the triumphs and the trials of their chosen field. Writers, musicians, coaches, business owners, athletes, and everything in between. We peel back the curtain to hear their stories, to walk their paths, to find out how they breathe life into their beautiful work. Thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of the Beautiful Work Podcast. I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time, featuring the critically acclaimed and unbelievably talented musician from the Bay Area, Megan Slankard. Before we get to that, a couple of quick announcements. If you have not already subscribed to the podcast, please make sure to do so on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you happen to be listening. Really would appreciate that. And some exciting news. Next Friday, September 25th, I will be releasing my 6th record, Alive in Costa Mesa. It's a 24-song live record that was recorded last summer at the Orange County Fair with the full 7-piece band. And so if you are just tuning in for the first time, I am also a musician, and you can find all of my work at dankrikorian.com or beautifulworkpodcast.com. You are listening to the instrumental versions of some of those songs today during the podcast. Okay, on to the show. As mentioned, Bay Area musician Megan Slankard has an impressive and lengthy musical resume. Besides selling over 40,000 copies of her own critically acclaimed albums, Megan has also been a finalist in international songwriting competitions, sang duets with trained Pat Monahan, played guitar on Jimmy Kimmel Live, and sang the national anthem at AT&T Park for the San Francisco Giants. Megan is here today to talk about her inspirational and songwriting process, how success changes over the course of a career, and listening and finding life's hum. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Megan Slankard. I want to start off and see if you could take us back for a moment, and if you can remember what it was like and maybe describe the first time you were ever on a stage and what that was like and where that was, or if you even remember where that was.
Oh, I mean, that is a great question. I think I would have to go back to maybe being about 10 or 11. I had started taking guitar lessons in Tracy, California, from this awesome little music store called Main Street Music. And they would do these recitals.
Nice.
And the recitals were just, a bunch of kids who are learning how to do things, learning pieces and playing them in front of our parents. And, I don't even know what song it was. I learned probably some very watered down version of some very simple song. And I remember just being petrified. And, you do like the 1 minute version of it, and then you get off, and that's what you got, and I'm so glad that it didn't discourage me from, continuing. There's
Yeah.
something about fear, honestly. I'm not what is it, a daredevil or somebody who seeks it out, but there's something about fear that is very, I mean, it's a very privileged thing to say, but very motivational, and that sort of like
Yeah.
excitement of like being terrified to be on stage or being terrified to sing something in front of someone, and uh and getting something from it, feeling
Yeah.
alive, or feeling like you've accomplished something, and maybe it's like walking over hot coals, but it's really interesting to like feel that feeling when you're 10, and then, many years later, I still feel that feeling when I get on stage, and I still like it
Yeah.
in this weird sort of way.
Gosh, I still feel that too all the time. Like before every show, there's like this thing in your gut where there is that fear, but then it's there's a thrill to it too, to know you're gonna be all right, to go through it, and kind of you feel better at the end of it. You said you still feel it today. Is it the same kind of feeling if you can remember back, or is it grown into something different, or you worry about or fear different things than you did, back all those years
I
ago?
think it has changed in a way. I think I do sometimes will notice it being that same sort of raw, like heart fluttering, butterflies in the stomach, sort of like I kind of want to throw up right now feeling. Sometimes I'll notice, I'm like, oh wow, that's interesting that I'm feeling that right now. And it could be a house concert, it could be singing in front of one person to share, like even a bandmate to share like a new idea. I notice it comes back sometimes, and I'm not sure why. But I think in general, I still get sort of like the body ache of just excitement and worry all tied up
Sure.
into one. Like, doesn't matter the stage, doesn't matter the audience. It's still always sort of there. I think it's good because I feel like it does for me is it sort of reminds me to be present, to stay in the moment, because it takes me out of the room and back into my body, which is good because I tend to be pretty
Mhm.
distracted sort of a person. I mean, maybe artists
Uh-huh.
usually are, I guess, with just being like your mind is floating around, always like looking at things and experiencing things in this very arty way, and always humming melodies. And sometimes it's good just to be like, okay, be here right now on stage and in front of these people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting point you made about the artists being kind of a distracted bunch. But I think though, and maybe you can relate to this, but when you are in the middle of a song or middle of a set, it does really center you. There is something nice about a show where you're just kind of in the room, you're with the audience, and you're really in the moment. More so than maybe outside of a show where you're just constantly trying to connect different
Yes.
parts of life to somehow make a song or
That's a
whatnot.
really good point. It is sometimes, I mean, I would say being on stage, like, especially with another person, like, if I have my band, I
Mm,
feel like that's when I'm the most connected with the music, um, itself. Like, I almost tune everything else out and like wake up after every song. It's really interesting. I'm actually like sort of thinking about this right now. Is like
yeah.
sometimes you get so lost in what is happening that it's almost like it's almost like a dream. But when I'm like, usually when I'm by myself and I'm singing a song on a stage, I tend to be more connected with the audience, and I don't know what it is.
Hmm.
I think ultimately there's something about losing oneself in the music, and the way I do that the most is when I get to play it with other people.
Yeah, that's a really, as you're talking, I'm kind of like connecting to my own experience, obviously, and I do both where I play solo or with a duo or trio, and then I also have a big seven-piece band, and it's a different thing
Yeah.
when you're with the band and you're just kind of all on stage having a moment together, and there could be 10,000 people there, there could be 10, and it's kind of like doesn't matter to the band, it's still feeling pretty good. But it's different when you're just up there by yourself trying to connect with the audience.
Yeah, and I really love it. I love actually having those different experiences with music, and I love that music is never. It's not like the same. It's like putting on a different outfit every day, where you can, like, if I am playing live by myself as a solo performer, I really get very chatty with my audience and very conversational with my music tends to change a lot. So, I really like becoming friends with my audience, like best friends, like being personal and sharing things that are probably shouldn't be shared. And, but the music itself also changes it. I might change a melody, or I might, add extra things or do a verse that I had cut out in a recording.
Mm-hmm.
And the music itself is also very conversational, where when I'm with the band, the music is obviously how we rehearse it for the most part. Otherwise, it'll be a train wreck. But it is very much a body experience then, where performing solo is more of a inclusive, like we're all a part of it. And the band thing is like, I sort of become, instead of like me, I sort of become a part of the music itself. It feels like
sure,
more trance. I don't know. That's very all, frou, but I like it.
No, I love it too. It's fun to listen to other artists talk, and it's hard to explain. I think what you're talking about, you're doing an amazing job of explaining. Sometimes, like after a show, like you try to explain to someone that isn't a musician, like how it feels, and it's like you can't really ever get to it. But you did it really well there. I want to kind of stay on that same going back thread, and you talked about the first time you're on stage and kind of the fear, and how you've grown through that and continue to still do that. But what were you like going up through music? So if we could stay on, your past, I guess, for a bit. Were you a musical child all the way through and through, or was it, you took lessons, or you learned by yourself, or how did you get into doing what you do now?
That is interesting too. I like, okay, so it's funny, just a quick tangent, is I really like questions like this because it sort of makes me re-examine the way things happened, which is really exciting. I think I was sort of like awakened to music. I explain it like with my mom. It's like there's always like this electrical current inside of us. And then if you always listen to, I call it the hum. It's like when you hear electricity, it makes this humming noise. And like, I always tell myself, if I listen to that, whatever that is, wherever it takes me, I'll always be doing the thing that I need to be doing. And I remember first becoming aware of that purpose, that hum, when I was 10 years old. I had been taking piano lessons, for whatever, a year or two, maybe 3 at that point. And I absolutely hated it. I hated it. It was the worst thing. I liked music.
Yeah.
I liked it when my dad put on CDs. I really enjoyed dancing around and singing along, but it was always in the background. And then my dad rented this Beatles movie from the library, because that's where we rented our movies as children.
Yeah.
Not even a cool place. They had like 5 movies that circulated in our tiny library, and every once in a while they'd get a new one, and my parents would pick it up and rent it, and we'd always be like, I don't want to watch this, but they put it on, and it was like this switch sort of flipped, where it was the Beatles movie Help, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is what music is. And I remember sort of like the hum inside me was like, okay, at first was going to be in the Beatles, and then when I sort of reevaluated that and realized it wasn't actually something that was possible, I was going to be, in my mind, it was going to be a rock and roll guitarist. Like, I didn't even really understand what fame was at that point. I just knew, I would sit there. My mom had like this little acoustic nylon string, throwaway guitar. And I just used to like, hold it in front of a mirror and strum open chords and just be like, meow, 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 meow. And I was going to be George Harrison and all of this stuff. And, my mother got me guitar lessons. My parents were very supportive, but they were like, if this is going to go like the piano lessons, then I don't know. But I was like, no, this is the one for me. I think this is going to be great. And as I went along this musical journey and discovering it, my sort of definition of what it was sort of changed. At first I wanted to be in the Beatles, then I wanted to be rock and roll guitar legend George Harrison, and then I wanted to be a guitarist in a band. Then I wanted to write songs and I wanted to sing them, and that sort of musical journey has totally morphed. And like today, one of my favorite things to do is sit in my studio and record and learn instruments I don't know. And, I have a piano, a drum kit, a cello, mandolins, ukuleles, guitars, a bass. I have tons of different little percussion instruments, a harmonium. And I would have to tell you, the majority of these, I couldn't find my way out of a paper bag. Like I am terrible at them, but they all bring me such excitement and they're fun to have around and they're fun to make noise on.
Right.
Oh, and they're fun to learn about. I sometimes give myself a challenge to, learn at least enough to record some new instruments. Like this month I'm going to try and put violin on this recording. And a lot of the times it's like, I would never show it to anybody ever because it's so garbagey, but there's something so exciting about it. And so it's like interesting to watch my career and my definition of what success is and my love of music change, but it's always sort of been very, I don't know, it's like following somebody down a path and you don't know where it's going to lead, but you have full faith that they're going to take you to the right spot.
Yeah. So where does that hum, where is it leading you at the moment?
That is a really great question. Like sometimes I don't feel like I feel like I don't actually know. And I sort of sit back and be like, okay, see what happens. And I'm not going to say that I don't get nervous, but it's like, being in a car with someone who has driven you around your whole life and still, pressing those imaginary brakes when they get close to another car. Like, it's safe. They've never let you down. They've never gotten in an accident, but you still have that like, oh, this is scary.
Yep.
Sort of reaction. And that's sometimes how I feel with the hum is like, sometimes I am pressing those imaginary brakes or like holding on to the, grab bar of, doom on the handle, whatever, what do you call it? The oh shit handle.
Yeah.
Sometimes I am holding on to that a little hard and white knuckling the journey, but it's like, it's never steered me wrong. So I know those reactions are sort of just like, they're not necessary. And
Yeah.
I think music, the outside of music, the music business, because of, everything going on right now with COVID and all of that, I think music will change forever because of it, at least live music. And I could be wrong, but it is interesting. It definitely changed in the next, little bit.
Yeah, 6 to 12 months or 18 months, 2 years, whatever it'll
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
It'd be really different, and especially for some of my friends who are more successful than I, who are bigger bands, like one of my favorite kind of things is a nice house concert.
Yep.
And you can do that outside and give people space and make people feel comfortable, probably sooner rather than later. But I am worried for some of the other. I mean, I'm worried for all of us, all of art, but I'm also worried about the venues, and the booking agents and the people sort of behind the scenes who are obviously just as important, if not more sometimes, than the artists themselves in like longevity, keeping our musical community together in like San Francisco, just watching Slim's close, and
Yeah.
it's like heartbreaking in its own way, like these venerable venues that are just have been around forever and have been such a big part of so many people's lives, whether you're a musician who's played there, or whether you're an artist, or whether you're an audience member who goes to connect with music. It's just, it is interesting to see it change, and then sort of wonder where your place, as a musician, is. Like, where is my place in all of this?
Right.
And I want to be responsible. I want to be a responsible human, and I want to keep creating art, and I want to use my voice for good. But it is sort of interesting to be like, what's next? Is this sustainable? Is this going to continue to be sustainable?
You've mentioned something that I've thought a lot about, and I've actually asked a few other artist friends of mine about during this time. And as we're recording this, we're still, deeply in the middle of the pandemic, as well as all of the unrest in society right now with the protests going on after the death of George Floyd.
Yeah.
But talking about the role of the artist right now, like what is our role in society? Because so much of the time, art is what can kind of help freeze frame a moment in time when you look back, and artists are always trying to write about the moment. But it's been, some people have had it said it's been really difficult to write. It's been difficult to create because there's just so much going on that it's kind of like information overload. Others have said it's been a really creative time. But what about you? What's kind of your feeling on the role of the artist right now, and then how have you handled kind of all that's going on at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, that is actually something that I'm sort of struggling with on a daily basis. Like, for me personally, I've always been very politically active on a personal level, and very like, I don't know, I sort of kept it out of my music a lot, and
Uh-huh.
I am definitely like a people pleaser at heart, and I never want to offend anyone, and so I've just like kept my personal beliefs and opinions sort of out of my music for a very long time. That has definitely changed over the last, I don't know, 4 years or so. It's definitely, a lot of the songs I write are, they're not, I've never been a very literal writer, so everything is sort of metaphorical,
Yeah.
which is, I would say, more confusing to people. But there is that fear of, am I doing enough? Like, I want to make sure that I'm being responsible as an artist and using my voice to reflect what's really important to me. And yeah, I don't want to offend anyone, but what I would rather, what is more important to me is to sort of say out loud the things that I believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you do that, people do get offended. And at this point, I don't care. Like,
Uh-huh.
I think in general, my audience feels the same way I do about things. and are frustrated with the same things that I'm frustrated with. I mean, I live in a sanctuary city. I live in San Francisco in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like through and through like a, you know, very, very liberal, very, you know, flower child sort of girl. And, I sort of fear that my music doesn't reflect that enough. And I think the only reason that is important, I mean, like, people have been using music as sort of political statements for ever since music has been invented.
Right.
Like, it has always been there to tell the tale of people and tell the story of humanity. And yeah, I think it was much more recent that we started making music not political. It
Yeah.
it's always, the folk tales have always been of the folk. They've always been shouting out about injustice and stuff. And I have seen people, uh, fans of music say, I just want to escape, I just want to get away from it, and I don't want my music to tell me what to do. Like, I remember people complaining about Bono all the time, and how Bono was always like, fist in the air, shouting, all of that
Yeah.
political stuff. But there's something so powerful about that. It doesn't feel, to me, when I'm looking at it, it doesn't feel like, you got this. It feels very inclusive. Like, we are fighting, we are doing this. And something like Woody Guthrie and all of that, all of those people who are just always been very like using their voice for good. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to write fluffy songs. I just want to make sure that I have that sort of call of like, do I need to be more literal with my music?
Right.
Or I don't know. It's like sort of my whole being is changing over the last 4 or 5 years. And with it, the voice of my music, it just is continuing to do the thing that it did when I was 10 years old. It's just continuing to follow this crazy hum down this crazy path. And the path is not a straight path. It has always changed. It has always, is always like morphed into something completely new. But it's always felt good.
During this time, have you found it easier or more difficult to express some of those sentiments that you're talking about? Like, are you just flowing with ideas right now of how you're trying to incorporate your sort of newer self the last 4 or 5 years, or is it more of a struggle to get to the bottom of those kinds of songs and ideas?
Well, I mean, I do write a lot, but writing has always sort of been a struggle. It's like, I don't know if it ever comes easy to anybody. I haven't really talked about it, but it is like a puzzle where you sit down and you're like, try to like, okay, what do I want to write about? Or like, how does this go? Or, what goes next?
Yep.
Or this sounds like Billy Joel, or, you're trying constantly to create something new out of, you're trying to, not only trying to create something new out of, a very limited amount of notes, but you're also, and ideas, you're also trying to translate at the same time, feelings into words. And it's like I don't know, it's never been super easy for me,
Yeah.
but I hate it and I like it at the same time.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah. And I think now it is more complicated than it was before, because I think my feelings are more complicated. So it is hard right now. It's like sort of, I feel sputtery and angry and frustrated at the world. And I feel frustrated at us as a collective human organism. Like I feel frustrated that it feels like there's a lack of care overall.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously I'm including myself in this. It just feels hard. I feel sort of stuck. And that's like a hard place to write from for me personally. Sometimes anger is anger is a great tool. It's a great like color to paint with.
Right.
And I have just finished two brand new EPs that I'm sort of sitting on because of all of this.
Yeah.
And one of them was brightly painted with anger, and the other one was brightly painted with sadness. And I think those, while very painful to create, very sort of it's easier to come out. It's, it comes out, it flows better, whatever.
It comes rushing out of you.
Yeah,
sometimes.
whether you want it to or not. And then sometimes this other, like trying to write, or I don't know if it's the same for you, but try to create from this place of like frustration. Sometimes it's really difficult for me. But I am excited to see. Sometimes it takes a little bit of like marination or marinating, and you have to sit with that feeling to figure out where it's going to go.
For as many brilliant and unforgettable songs that our world has produced, there has never been a universal formula, flowchart, or how-to guide that helps connect the mysterious dots of songwriting. Some of history's greatest songwriters have had a hard time themselves explaining their own craft and process. The late John Prine said, "I could never teach a class on songwriting. I'd tell them to goof off and find a good hideout." And Rod Stewart pined, "Songwriting's never been a natural art for me. It's always a bit of a struggle." And perhaps Keith Richards had it best when he said, "Songwriting's a weird game." In truth, there's really only one way that good songs get written, and it's through long, unseen hours comprised of hard, mistake-filled, and painstaking work. And the amount of emotional, physical, and mental energy it takes to come up with just one song shows just how great a true professional like Megan Slankard is, as she's churned out album after album of critically acclaimed material. And as a professional songwriter, always willing to push herself beyond her boundaries, Megan shows the importance of being open and vulnerable, of making mistakes, and of being comfortable in increasing uncertainty. And as the great writer Neil Gaiman said, "Go and make interesting mistakes. Make amazing mistakes. Make glorious and fantastic mistakes. Break rules. Leave the world more interesting for you being here. Make good art." How do you know someone that's done it for as long as you have and have had so much success, and you're such a great songwriter and performer and storyteller, but how do you know when you have something great? What is it? A feeling? Is it like you show it to somebody else and they validate it for you, or is it just, is there a moment where okay, I'm going to keep going with this, this feels right?
Well, thank you, first of all. And then secondly, never. I never know.
Uh-huh.
uh, it is really, this is an interesting thing that I've been noticing, especially with these last two EPs that I just finished, that I've noticed is listening to and sort of like holding my own music up to see is difficult for me, and I don't know why. It has to be created, so I
Uh-huh.
create it. I enjoy creating it, so I create it. I even enjoy playing it, but if I have to look at it on some sort of critical level, I will tear it apart.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know why that is. I don't know if there's some sort of perfectionism thing or imposter syndrome, or when someone asks me to be involved in something, like I've been doing a lot of recording on other people's music recently. I mean, that's essentially the only, that and Patreon is the only work that I have right now during these COVID times.
Uh-huh.
But honestly, I'm always surprised. I'm like, why would you ask me to record on your music? And I don't know where that's coming from, but it is really interesting. So there will be moments where I'm creating I have this little home studio in my kitchen that is the only light in my house, is this big window in my kitchen, southern facing, in a long railroad car style apartment. So it's like the only light comes from this window. So I sit here with my laptop and my little recording setup, and it's my favorite thing to do. It's like stare out at the garden and make music. And there are moments where it's clicking, and there are moments where it doesn't click, and I'll be like, okay, well, I guess I'll come back to you later.
Right.
But I'll get up, I'll make myself some tea, I'll pace around, I'll chew on an idea, I'll come back, I'll try some stuff. And there are moments where I'm like, okay, well, I guess that works. And then there are moments where I'm like, yes, 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 this is it. That's what I was looking for. And the hair will stand up on my arms, and I'm just so excited that it feels like a gift or something. Not to be like woo woo again, but like it feels like some sort of like someone gave it to me. Like, here you go. Try that. See if this puzzle works. When you're like sorting through your jigsaw puzzle and you finally find that the corner piece you were looking for, it's like that feeling where you're like, yes.
100%.
And
yeah.
and I get that. And sometimes I'll even like, listen through and, mute different things and listen to different parts soloed and be like, okay, that was cool. I like how that worked. But when a piece is created and finished, I usually just let it be finished. And I would honestly say I would rarely revisit them. And
wow.
Yeah, so I'll show something to somebody and they'll be like, this is great. And I'll be like, you're lying. And I don't know. I mean, it is easy to show something to like my mother and father, who are my biggest fans ever, and just be like, yo, here's a new song.
Yep.
They like to listen to the new ones, and they'll be like, this is the best thing you've ever made ever.
Yep. Oh,
And
I love the parent support. It's like, I don't know where we'd be without, parents being your biggest fans, and everything you do is like, this is the best thing. But you need that too in your life,
You do. You for sure do, because the rest of the life is definitely not like that. Yeah.
That's right.
Even my bandmates who love me dearly aren't like that. They'll be like, not your best idea.
Yeah.
Which honestly, because I am very fortunate to have parents who support me, I'm so, so lucky. Because I know that's not the case for everybody. But I do really crave that feedback that's like, this could be stronger. I think you could do, I think this part isn't as good, or I don't understand what you're trying to convey here. This felt a little confusing, or, this song sounds a little bit like your last song in that you're using the same instruments. Have you tried changing XYZ? Like, or the mix is muddy, maybe you want to take EQ your guitars out of your vocal range or something. Like, I really crave that sort of I crave it when people tell me that I'm doing something wrong. Not if I'm not doing it wrong, but I know I am doing stuff wrong. So I sort of crave that supportive, constructive criticism. I mean,
Yep.
not unasked for,
Right.
not like
when you ask for it.
not someone coming up down the street, hey, that last thing you did was
Yep.
garbage. But like, I sort of really like, hey, can I give you, some advice on this? And me being like, yeah, tell me, because I don't know, there's something about, I crave to learn. And I hate knowing that there's stuff that I'm doing wrong, that people are aware that I'm doing wrong, and they just won't tell me.
But you're so right in the sense of, it's important to have people in your inner circle who, first of all, you trust musically, artistically, that they know what they're talking about, or they have your best interests in mind, and that they will be, pointedly critical of stuff. And it's really helpful. I have a couple guys in my band that I'll send rough stuff, ideas to them all the time of mine, and just always give them the question, tell me what you think, be honest.
Yeah.
What can change, what's good. And sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't. Sometimes they come back and I'm like, no, I think I still like how I did it. But it's at least good to go through the whole process of having that kind of hard conversation, because art is so personal to us. And so sometimes, like, you talked about fear a lot earlier and going on stage, but there's also the fear of just sharing something new that you've created from your soul in your kitchen, and then giving it to someone and then being like, I don't really like that. I don't get it.
Indeed.
That's hard too.
Yeah. Oh, I 100% relate with that. Yeah.
How about your inspirational process? So, like, are you when you say get stuck, or not even get stuck, but just in your day-to-day, how you kind of fill up your cup with ideas? Are you a reader? Are you someone that watches movies? Do you listen to a lot of other people's music? How are you filling up your cup of ideas so when you go to write, there's stuff in there to draw from?
Well, I listen to a lot of podcasts about murder, so
okay. You get along with my wife really well. She's a podcast murder junkie.
Yeah.
Every time I see her, she loves it.
I blame my parents because we watched a lot of film noir growing up, and honestly, a lot of my songs sort of have that film noir. I like to look at it through that lens of like burnt sepia, and like definitely, I don't always write from the good guy's perspective, and it's fun, but I would say, like, when I feel most inspired is when I would say there's pretty much always music inside my mind, so I don't listen to a lot of music. I probably should listen to a lot more, but I don't really.
Mm-hmm.
I like the sound of silence. Oh, not trying to plagiarize Paul Simon there, but I love Paul Simon.
Yeah.
I like the sound of like the inner workings of my brain. I know that's weird because, like, usually my brain is a madhouse of people throwing. It's like a food fight up there sometimes, but I like the sound of it. It's really interesting. Especially when I pay attention to it. I mean, most of the time it's just chaos, but if I'm home alone or in a space by myself, like the car, I would say it's usually there's nothing going on except for what's inside my head. And for some reason, that's the way that melodies, I'll constantly be humming. I'll constantly be singing to things. My mom pointed out maybe like 10 years ago that I mimic the sound of every noise around me. So I'll hear something and I'll match its tone, or I'll harmonize with it. And it's really embarrassing when you're around people you don't know. But in general, I think I'm always trying to find the inspiration in something. Like if you're in a big room and I'm talking and I'll hear one of the words I'm saying is like resonating in the room, I'll try and find the pitch of the room. And I feel like that's me with life and inspiration is I'm always trying to find, you know, where the inspiration is, where is it resonating? And, you know, walking, lots of long walks does it. Like, I don't sort of clears out the dust and lets
Yeah.
things sort of flow around. Reading makes me inspired, though sometimes especially these days, I've picked up Dracula like
Uh-huh.
maybe 3 months ago, and I sort of like petered out in the middle of it. But like just reading words and seeing things from different eras, like that tends to, I mean, I'm not that
Spark
I'm,
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
not that I'm going to write about vampires or anything because it's not really my bag, but it is,
You never know.
you never know. And, I just, yeah, I think that honestly, daydreaming is like my favorite thing to do. Is like, I make space as a writer, I make space to create something. I try to do it every day, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
just a few minutes where I sit down without like a device or anything. Um, and just daydream or open up a Word document and type around. Or one of my favorite things is to doodle, just like grab a pen and just start drawing nothing. But that stuff, it's like
Yeah.
chewing on something. I don't know. It's like forming something on a clay or something until you're like, oh, this is what I'm making. It is like one of those
Yeah.
things. Sometimes you start creating and you don't know what it is yet. And then you step back from it. And you're like, okay, I see something here. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're like, this is still a blob of clay.
100%. There was a song on my latest record that came out last year so I have, my last year I released my fifth record, but the song that was the closing song on my fifth record was a song I wrote for my second record, but it just wasn't ready. Something about it kept like
Yeah.
sitting there, like it's missing something. And so, like you've mentioned, it just for years I would just kind of revisit it, now not ready, and then finally it's like I needed some more life to happen to put into the song, or I needed something else. And songs are funny like that, because that song, it took me like I guess 10 years to finish, and then there'll be some song I'll just be humming, or you hear it and it's almost done within like 10 minutes. You sit down, you iron out the basic chord structure, and then you're off and running. And it's hard to know how things are going to land, but like you, I often find ideas and like themes or whatnot come when I'm, like you mentioned, like I'm running, or I'm out for a walk, or I'm on a long drive,
Yeah.
or like my mind's just clear to kind of create and think, and then things can creep in from that angle.
Sitting here nodding my head. Yes, 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 yes. It is really interesting. Like, I, I don't very often get a song that like sort of relinquishes itself to me in this sort of like, here you go, here's all of the
Mm,
inspiration. um
yeah.
but some do feel like an exciting journey, and some do feel like you're driving over potholes, like, oh my god, like come on, I need a better like verse lyric or something here.
Yeah.
And some you sit back from and be like, okay, dust your hands off, that feels good, cohesive, I'm proud of that, moving on. And some you're like, man, I guess I'll save that for another time because that doesn't feel
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Just put it aside and do something else and come back to it with
Yeah,
some fresh eyes later. Um,
exactly.
Man, I'm having so much fun digging into the intricacies of songwriting, inspiration, all that, but I don't want to just disappear down the wormhole too much for our listeners. So I want to kind of swing things back a little bit. By the way, I'm loving this conversation, but I want to swing
Oh,
things
me
back to
too.
you and your career a little bit, and look at it from, and this is something I guess maybe artists don't talk about a whole lot on a podcast, but did you ever feel like giving up? Was there any time in your career where you're like, this is too hard, or for whatever amount of reasons, you weren't sure if this was the path going forward? It was the hum taking you somewhere else? Or have you always felt pretty much, hey, I'm going to stay right where I'm at and just keep gutting through it?
Well, I have never, I've questioned the hum, but I've never considered giving up. I have questioned the hum, and I've questioned like the future. Believe me, I question the future all the time. Like how am I gonna, where's the hum gonna take me, and is that gonna be sustainable enough for me to continue to survive, aka pay rent, get food, you know, pay my medical bills? Like, is this gonna be sustainable in some way, or is it gonna, what is it gonna be next? Is it gonna be like down the line, is songwriting and recording gonna be able to be sustainable enough that I make enough money so I can save a little bit? And you know, success to me used to be, the 10-year-old in me was like, this is what success is. It would look out at the picture of success and see Megan on a big stage, shred an electric guitar, playing in front of thousands of people, just like crushing it, squeedily, squeedily, squee, all day long. And now success to me today, and it does not, I might add, feel like a compromise. It just changed. Success to me feels like when I have enough money to buy the good cheese at the supermarket. Like, I don't look back at that and go, oh man, that sucks. She really like didn't become famous, or I feel better about my career choices now than I do looking back at my tenure. Would I like to be able to shred some like tasty hot guitar licks on stage in front of hundreds of thousands of people? Sure, that would be really fun. But honestly, I love what I do now. I just love it. I love the people who support my music.
Mm-hmm.
I love the venues I've gotten to play, and I've been playing with the same bandmates for 12, maybe 15 years now. I love making music with them. I love creating music in my kitchen studio, and I feel very successful. And I feel so grateful for this. And like if someone offered me like a cool opportunity, I would look at it and see if it felt right. And sometimes I get these great opportunities and I'm like, yes, let's do this. And it takes me in another direction, the journey veers into a direction I wasn't expecting, and it's exciting, and it opens up other doors. But I think that it's sort of that. It's not like I don't have this big end vision of this like grand like finish line. There's no finish line. I love it's like walking through a beautiful valley where every path you walk down, or every corner you turn, you get to see something else that's just so cool, like a cool bird or gorgeous flowers or something. And that's what my career has felt like. So yeah, there are times where I'm like, ugh, I hate this bend. I hate turning around this corner. This sucks. Or that thing that didn't come through that is very disappointing. And there's sometimes where you're like starting to walk down and the clouds are starting to come, and you're like, is it going to, am I going to be safe out here? Like, what's my future look like?
Yep.
But I've never questioned being on the path. Like, I've had people question it for me. Believe me, I've had a lot of people question it for me. I've been in relationships where I've had boyfriends tell me that, at some point you have to, like, it's great, I support you, but at some point you have to, be realistic and get the real job and the day job, and we have to grow up. And I've had people come up to me and say, man, I've always liked you. I'm so surprised you never made it. And to those people, I just say, I have made it. I am making it every day. And I actually don't care. I don't even need to speak to those people because I am having such a great time. And we're all fed as human beings this idea of what a musician is supposed to be, you know.
Right.
And like when I say musician, people may think Taylor Swift or, you know,
Yeah.
Dave Grohl, but to me, a musician is like someone who plays music.
Right.
And I, you know, a lot of people think that too, but it's just like, it is interesting how many people I meet on this journey who are telling me what I'm supposed to look like or what it's supposed to look like for me, or they're sad because it doesn't look like something for me. And it doesn't mean I don't get frustrated. It doesn't mean that I don't want it to look like something else at certain points. You know, it doesn't mean I'm not frustrated if I like, you know, I'm trying to get a song placed in something and it looks good and then it falls through, or, you know, I'm trying to open up for that band, or I'm trying to get that gig, or the tour falls through in the middle, or whatever. It doesn't mean that I'm not disappointed. It doesn't mean that because it's definitely not easy. And there's a lot of times where I'm like, yeah, I would really like to be able to replace my car, but that's not really a thing right now. But I look back and in 200 years, none of this will matter. Like, I will be dead. Everyone I know will be dead. And it would just be really nice to have had a great time on the way.
And you're being quite modest because you have had so many great gigs and tours and success from, you know, even, you know, people in the industry that have so much respect for you. Well, what's one of the best investments that you've made in your career?
Ooh. I would say one of the best investments that I made in my career was as a young artist, I got a Beatles chord, you know, songbook, and I learned every single Beatles song. And, you know, I think it taught me a lot about songwriting and like how songs are made. And it taught me so much about melody and lyrics, and you know, I would play them along to the Beatles records and, you know, make modifications where the songbook got it wrong. It sort of it helped me cut my teeth and you know, like get some hours into how to play guitar. And I was always like listening and trying to figure out, you know, how songs worked. And I think spending all that time doing that was really good for me.
Yeah.
And the other my best investment was buying my Guild D55 guitar, which
Oh, that's nice.
I love it so much. It's, you know, I don't even play acoustic guitar that much these days. I switched sort of more to electric stuff, but it's my favorite thing. It's like hanging on the wall right in front of me. So
yeah, it's a beautiful guitar for sure.
yeah,
my bandmate's got a beautiful Guild as well, and I'm always hoping he leaves it hanging around for long enough that I can maybe take it home for a few days. Well, my last question, I'll get you out of here on this, is what brings you the most joy in what you do?
I think creating. I write and record a new song every month for Patreon and the people who support me there. I think I just love, I'll just say I love Patreon and creating, using this platform, releasing using this platform, because I think the group of listeners and supporters on Patreon who support me are excited to see what I come up with next. And so I sort of use the platform and use my little kitchen recording studio as a way to experiment and figure out, like, I always try to keep it fresh, and I never want to, if possible, never want to like write the same song. I mean, maybe I'll write the same song, but I'd like to change it up, and I want to learn. I love learning how to do new things. So essentially recording in my kitchen studios, looking out this window, is pretty much my favorite thing in the world.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Beautiful Work podcast. Please make sure to subscribe. And until next time, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, keep making that beautiful work. We'll see you soon.